December 16th, 2021. Spider-Man No Way Home, finally releasing after a year of hype and just building up to this. Spider-Man No Way Home, the first movie in a post-pandemic world to ever make $1 billion. One of the best movie theater experiences I've, along with so many other people, have ever had in their lives. To so many people, this is among their favorite movies released in the 2020s so far. But why? Why is Spider-Man No Way Home considered one of the best Spider-Man movies? Does it deserve that title? Why? Does it deserve its 93% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes? Is this actually the best Spider-Man movie? Today I want to find out, because somehow it's been a year now since this movie came out, and that's crazy to me, because it not only feels like both a lifetime ago, but also just yesterday that I was watching this movie on premiere night, so excited to finally see Spider-Man No Way Home. But that was a year ago. 1 year ago. So let's finally find out. Does Spider-Man No Way Home still hold up 1 year later? Before we get too far into the video, I just want to ask each and every one of you to like the video and subscribe. It helps out the channel so much and lets me know you guys are still enjoying the videos I'm making. But I know you guys don't really care about that, so just make sure you're subscribed and let's get on with the video. The movie opens right where the last one ended, with Mysterio revealing 16-year-old Peter Parker's identity to the world. We then get a quick-paced chase opening that honestly feels like it was pulled directly from Spider-Man Far From Home, which I find that really interesting to me, because this movie, for the most part, it doesn't really feel like the other two Home trilogy movies, but these first 10 to 15 minutes are 100% pulled from Far From Home. They feel like the movie is just continuing on, and honestly I think that's a really cool thing, how the movie slowly fades away from this, jovial MCU movie into a Spider-Man movie. So not only does Peter grow up throughout this movie, but the movie grows up throughout the movie, and that's a really nice touch. Whether it was intentional or not, in my mind it 100% was, but I guess we'll never know. Like I said, the movie moves really quick in the beginning, but that really works to its advantage because there was a lot of ground the movie had to cover, and it could have got stuck in any one of those minor plot conveniences, but it somehow didn't. That's something I noticed upon rewatch. We're also reintroduced to Matt Murdock in the MCU, played of course by Charlie Cox, the GOAT. He doesn't have a big part in here at all, but it would be wrong for me not to mention him. This was the first of many cheers that my theater would let out during the movie. We then move on to some The World Knows That Peter Parker is Spider-Man hijinks, with Spider-Man and his friends not getting into any of the colleges they applied for, not being able to go to high school without swarms of people following them or really do anything. We also get a lot more J. Jonah Jameson in this movie, obviously with J.K. Simmons returning from the Raimi movies. Now maybe this is a hot take, but I don't really know how well J.K. Simmons fits this J. Jonah. Like, he feels more like a parody of the Raimi version, but worse, and I don't know how to feel about it. Like, obviously he's a great actor and he's good in this movie for the most part, but he doesn't really get much to do, and with the little he does get to do, it's just not really for me. But like, I feel like this would have been the perfect time to pass the torch on to someone else, but I'm not gonna complain. It's great to have JK back, and presumably he'll be in the college trilogy as well, so hopefully we'll get a more fleshed out version of him in the future. Back to the actual movie. Like I said, Peter, Ned, and MJ get rejected from MIT due to Spider-Man related controversy, and this is when Sony called Kevin Feige to just inject this movie with an armful of MCU. We get Dr. Mr. Stephen Benedict Multiverse Strange, and also Wong, when Peter goes to the Sanctum Sanctorum to ask them to undo Mysterio revealing his identity, to which Strange just like weirdly obliges. Like, he's just okay with doing the spell for a kid he barely knows. Anyway, the spell gets all messed up, and we get a bunch of spider people showing up in the MCU. The explanation here is that the spell drew in people that know Peter Parker as Spider-Man, but Doctor Strange was able to close the spell so that only a few got through, specifically from just 2 different universes. Also, Venom, I guess. Remember that? Because I didn't. I forgot. Why? The next important scene is probably the bridge sequence. That bridge, the bridge, honestly the peak of cinema. But honestly, this scene was shown in like all 2 of the trailers, and I think we all had a weird connection to it going in because we knew this was when we were gonna get the action. And like I said, this is just a really fun scene. It's one of the best action set pieces in a Spider-Man movie, in my opinion. Only gripe I have with the scene is that he's wearing the Iron Spider suit. Like, it is just so ugly. And he like flies to the bridge instead of, I don't know, web slinging, but whatever, because Alfred Molina is back. He's here. He looks great. He's Doc Ock, and he's talking about the power of the sun in the palm of his hand. A lot, actually. They talk about it a lot.
Power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
I'm pretty sure he was actually de-aged for this movie. I think I've seen that somewhere. And honestly, it looks pretty good because it doesn't even look like he was de-aged a ton. But it's just awesome to see Doc Ock. You know, like Doc Ock is back. We haven't seen Doc Ock since Spider-Man 2. That was 18 years ago. And it's just really cool to see him here. And it's also just like really cool to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man go up against Doc Ock and specifically Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. It's just really cool to see. But in general, this is just a really cool scene with a lot of really creative ideas in it. Like how Peter stops Doc Ock, he pretty much Bluetooths to him. But I kind of like it because at least I'm assuming we won't be seeing him doing stuff like this ever again in the MCU. And whether this is your favorite version of Spider-Man, it's probably not your favorite. It's not mine either, but a lot of people really like this version of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So it's fair that in this movie they deserve to get a proper send-off. And it's cool to just see how this Spider-Man would deal with these villains. We also get a quick look at the Green Goblin. My theater went crazy when he came on screen, and a year later I was just excited. He's only there for like a second, but we do get to see his new suit, which I don't hate, but I don't love either. It's an altered version of what he wears in the 2002 movie, but like, why do that? The movie, like, the suit looked good. You could have just recreated that suit, then gave him the upgraded one later in the movie, but it doesn't look terrible. My only like real gripe with the suit is they seem like they consciously made the helmet worse. I'm very aware that the helmet is completely CG, and you can tell in this movie. It looks like the whole helmet was just like pushed together, and it just doesn't look great. Like, just recreate the original mask, you know? We then go back to Doctor Strangeland and get some sweet exposition. We find out that the Lizard was captured in the sewers by Strange, which that would have been really cool to see, just so Lizard could do literally anything in this movie, other than be a weird non-entity that's obsessed with turning people into lizards.
You know I can give you a real makeover.
Let me guess. Into a lizard?
Exactly.
Also, his CGI is weird in this movie. It's not bad, so to say, but I never really felt like he was actually there like I did in Amazing Spider-Man 1. And I'm also like 99% sure that he looks very different than he did when I watched it in theaters. Someone fact check me here in the comments, but he looks a lot more like he did in Amazing Spider-Man 1 now than he did in the trailers, and also than he did during the movie on opening night, which I'm fine with because it's, you know, better. But some scenes did catch me off guard, especially later on with Tobey's suit. I don't know why, but it didn't even look as good as it did in 2002 in this movie. But it seems like they worked on the movie before they released it digitally, and it looks a lot better now. Anyway, we're getting off track because Peter now has some bad guys to catch. Specifically, Sandman from Spider-Man 3, Electro from Amazing Spider-Man 2, and Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, the Man, from Spider-Man 2002. This scene of Peter going against Sandman and Electro is one of my favorites in the movie. I can't really explain why, but like this black and gold suit looks really good on screen in my opinion. Electro is good, Sandman is good, the setting is good. It all feels like it was pulled directly from a comic book, and that's what the home trilogy was really missing up until this movie. This scene overall is just really good, and it's just a lot of fun. We then meet Aunt May and Norman, and I just want to talk about both of these characters for a little bit, starting with Marissa Tomei's Aunt May. I feel like most people that know what she's capable of as an actor agree that we really missed out on something in these movies. She was given nothing to do in Homecoming and was barely even in Far From Home. And while this movie tries to make up for that a little bit, we do get some great stuff with her here, but I just wish we got a little more in the movies leading up to it. Just make that great responsibility speech hit a little bit more. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe, he is just perfect in this movie. Like, I didn't know that was possible to make the perfect villain, but they did. He's perfect here. You know, Spider-Man No Way Home tends to get a little lost with its villains sometimes. Like, no one's favorite character in this movie was the Sandman, but a lot of people's favorite character in this movie just might have been the Green Goblin. And if it wasn't obvious enough the first time I watched it, upon rewatch, it's 100% clear he is the villain of this movie. And that's really cool because we get to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man go up against somebody that is just pure evil for the first time in the MCU. And Willem Dafoe is just basking in this performance, really becoming the Green Goblin just like he did 20 years ago, and it's amazing to watch. Now we get some more MCU cape shit with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange coming to a disagreement, which obviously leads to a multiversal, mirror-dimensional, geometrical fight scene. And honestly, while I might sound like I'm hating on it, it's a super fun scene, and the fight itself is interesting and uses both Peter's and Strange's skill sets. Also, something that bothered me when I watched it in theaters was, well, this.
You know what's cooler than magic? Math.
Yeah, it's a little cringe, but honestly, a year, some maturing, and an Algebra 2 class later, I kind of like this scene. I think it's a lot of fun and gives Tom Holland's Spider-Man some much-needed personality, you know, beyond the weird 12-year-old immaturity stuff from the first two movies. So I'm okay with Peter Parker, because Peter Parker's a little cringe, and that's okay, okay? Now this is where the movie gets good. I mean, it's been good the whole time, but this is where it goes from, like, Homecoming good to a really good Spider-Man movie, and just stays consistently good for the rest of the movie. And I think that's because we strip away away from the MCU formula a little bit and just go Spider-Man, man. This is what we want, Marvel, Sony. This is what we want. We want Spider-Man. We don't want any more MCU cookie cutter because we get about 50 of those a year. Just give us Spider-Man. And to be fair, with this movie, they did. This is Spider-Man. So Peter decides to cure the 5 villains so that when they get to go home, they don't die fighting Spider-Man. Now, ignore how that doesn't really work because who cares? I mean, I care, but it's not that important. What is important is the villain. What's interesting here is there's no villain introduction in this movie because, well, we've been introduced to these villains for years now, and that really just changes the dynamic of the movie completely, where people are cheering for these villains just as much as they are the heroes. Now this scene does pretty much reveal that the priority for these villains in this movie went Goblin, then Electro and Doc Ock, Sandman, and then Lizard. Because what does Lizard even do here? He just stays in the van and doesn't really get any interaction with any of the other characters. But after a really cool Peter tingle, I hate that it's called that, just call it the Spider Sense, please. In the new trilogy, call it the Spider Sense, please. But after this really cool, tense, really tense scene, the Goblin reveals himself. And we get an awesome, practical, for the most part, fight that's intense and brutal and cool and everything a Spider-Man vs. a Green Goblin fight should be. Look at this is amazing. Also, Electro and Sandman are there. Anyway, the long and short of it, May ends up with a glider through the stomach. And we get a heart-wrenching scene. A true display of Tom Holland and Marissa Tomei both being amazing actors that probably deserved better than Far From Home. But May gives Peter the great power, great responsibility speech, and we all cried in the theater. But for me, there was a genuine connecting of the dots of, oh, Jon Watts knew what he was doing. Jon Watts was not just making weird high school comedies. He was building to this the whole time. Or at least I believe so. This whole trilogy was meant to be an elongated origin story. And while I don't think that's the greatest use of 3 movies, it's interesting and it's different. And it was also very well executed. I just wish we got more Peter and May before she Uncle Ben. Also, how hard would it have been to just put Ben's grave next to hers? Come on, guys. We then get some beautiful shots in the rain that look like they were pulled from a completely different movie, and then it gets quiet. We go to a house with Ned and MJ, and it's really calm and sad. And there's maybe an hour left in the movie, and I'm sitting in the theater a year ago thinking, man, were we crazy? Are Tobey and Andrew really not in this movie? Did we spend months harassing Andrew Garfield over photoshopped images? Was this really a waste of time? No, it wasn't. Well, I mean, maybe the harassing part wasn't great, but there they were. Tobey and Andrew back on screen again after 14 and 7 years respectively. They're back. Spider-Man is back. And honestly, if I had to take a guess, I think people liked it. I think people resonated with seeing their favorite actors again together, seeing their Spider-Man. It's really beautiful. And in case you're wondering, the little kid in me, that little kid that watched Amazing Spider-Man at 7 years old with his father at the movie theater, still a year after No Way Home, was jumping up and down in excitement when Andrew Garfield, my Spider-Man, came through that portal. It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. So there's not a ton of movie left, and you pretty much know what's happening here. Peter 2 and Peter 3 go to talk to Peter 1, and they talk about Ben, they talk about Gwen, and then they stare at each other for a little bit, and they're ready to be Spider-Man. They team up to cure all the bad guys, and we get a really fun scene with everyone just hanging out, making cures for the villain. And while I love this scene, trust me, I love this scene, you can 100% tell they knew in making this movie that people would be cheering a lot. So I'm grateful that they didn't put any important dialogue in places where they knew people would be cheering. The real issue here is that they didn't put any dialogue in those places. And that becomes much more noticeable a year later when I'm the only one cheering while sitting in my living room by myself. So there's just a bunch of scenes, especially after Tobey and Andrew show up, where characters just stare at each other for a little bit after saying something. And it gets a little awkward after a little while. But eventually they work up cures for all 4 of the villains. They cured Otto earlier in the movie. And they head off to the Statue of Liberty. So then we get the Spider-Man fighting against all the villains in a huge superhero battle that is a little too long, but the movie makes up for it by giving us this scene of the 3 Spider-Men just hanging out before the fight. I love this. Everybody loves this. People would watch 2 hours of just this, trust me, but instead we get a really cool action scene where one by one they cure all the villains and reuse footage of Sandman and Lizard from their original movies. We also get a nice reunion between Doc Ock and Tobey, and also Electro and Andrew, which is just really nice to see. We literally get everything in like 40 minutes. Everything that we want, it's there. Peter 3, Andrew Garfield even gets a chance to redeem himself and save MJ after she falls off the Statue of Liberty. And man, this scene hurts. This scene means everything. We got everything we could have ever wanted, except Tobey and Green Goblin. They don't even interact in the movie. Well, I mean, they kind of do. They got this. But it's cool, I guess. I mean, we also get to see the dark side, the anger issues, the repressed rage that are inside of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and also that will 100% be manipulated by the symbiote in the next trilogy, because man, we really can't go 3 Spider-Man movies without Venom for some reason. Anyway, multiverse stupidity is causing hundreds of Spider-Man villains to just float around in the sky and start breaking into the world for some reason, and the only way to stop it is by making the whole world forget who Peter Parker is, and in turn make Tom Holland the least Peter Parker, and turn him into the most Peter Parker that we've ever seen in live action. Like, look at his apartment. He's getting his GED. He's alone. Look at his apartment. He's looking at the police radios. He sewed his own suit. Look at his apartment. He is Spider-Man. Look at this suit. Look at this swing. It's optimistic. It's hopeful. Hopeful that the next trilogy, these next 3 Spider-Man movies, will be the most Spider-Man a Spider-Man movie can be, man. And that's Spider-Man No Way Home. That is the point. So a year later, does this movie hold up? Is this one of the best Spider-Man movies? Yeah, it does. Does it have flaws? Yeah, it does. Big ones, little ones, nitpicky ones. Yeah, it's not perfection. It's not Spider-Verse, but it's good. It's fun, and it's Spider-Man. It is really, really Spider-Man this time. And that's what we deserved, and that's what we wanted. And that's what makes this movie still so good a year later. Man, it's been a long year.